So everybody, welcome back to the Game House, the Game House, and I have the I get to I always say this, and I repeat myself often, but it's 100% true. I get to talk with really smart people. I meet them in real life. I meet them online, and today I have with me somebody who I've looked forward to talking to her for a while. She's very much into stats and very much into hard data, and that's one of the things that I think we really lack at the moment in gaming and esports when it comes to the competitive side. You do have sites that focus on collecting data and metrics for marketing purposes, like a Newzoo. And so today I have with me Jordan, and she works with these numbers, and she has brought some excellent data and some excellent insights. And I actually met Jordan this last summer at Amiibo, and I am very fortunate to have her with me today. So Jordan, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, it's great to be here. I'm glad that it all worked out. So, my background, just to give you a bit of a sense, I mostly work in esports, looking at viewership data and working with social media data. Right now, I work for FanAI. We're the leading audience insights platform in esports. We do, a lot of work on selling sponsorships for teams, particularly a lot of Overwatch teams. Some of our clients that you've heard of are Cloud9. We work with TSM. We work with Optic. We work with the Seoul Dynasty and Gen G. So lots of really interesting people that I get to interact with on a daily basis. And, but I got my start writing for the Esports Observer. I sort of kicked off all of their Twitch coverage to a certain extent, especially with all those graphics that you see floating around on Twitter. And it's always been my goal to help people understand the space through numbers and through some sort of objective lens, whether that be through viewership or elsewhere. And, that way we can actually, rather than going on gut feelings with a lot of things, like I think a lot of us tend to do, actually get some unbiased, raw data on certain topics.
Speaking of those certain topics, this last weekend was the launch for season 2 for the Overwatch League, and because there's so much going on in esports at the same time as Overwatch was launching, and we're all going nuts overseas, you had a major event for CS:GO as well. It was IEM Katowice, I think that's how you say it. And so I saw some really interesting numbers, and so as far as viewership between the two events, and I wanted to get Jordan in here because this is what she does. I'm just somebody who sits back and sees things from a sort of just kind of compares things on a macro level. But Jordan is knee deep in this. So Jordan, sort of talk about the numbers from the Overwatch opening weekend, the numbers for Katowice, and just how those compare, perhaps some insight that you have for all that.
Yeah, let's start with Overwatch. So there is a big report that's come out, talking about how average viewership is down and a couple of other things around those lines. Over the weekend, it earned, depending on who you ask, somewhere between 6.5 million-ish hours watched, and on average around 110 to 140,000 viewers watching on average at any given point in time. Our specific numbers through our platform, I've got 6.6 million hours watched and 134,000 average concurrence. And just to give some clarification, all those numbers that you see everywhere, they're going to be slightly different. It's really about the relative number comparison.
Right.
Between the two, it just depends on when people start recording and stop recording on certain Twitch streams. That'll always happen. But generally in that ballpark range is about right. And
so you're saying that for Overwatch opening weekend, there's about 6.6 a million hours viewed. Now, so are we talking live viewing, or are we talking people going back to VODs and taking a look? I mean, that number, it's a big number, but I'm sure within the number you can take it and sort of carve it up any way you want.
Absolutely. So, I mean, that number is just live. We're just talking about Twitch. We're not talking about VODs saved and again, one of the things that's impacting the viewership probably is the fact that it's on, ESPN, on MLG, on Disney XD.
Okay.
And also, I mean, the vast majority of the viewership, I have a lot to say about Chinese stream numbers, of course, but a lot of the viewership is going to come from China in particular because so many Chinese teams were added.
Okay, so I saw a number that said the average concurrence for the weekend for Overwatch were like for what was it, for non-Chinese viewing audiences was like 200,000 or 240,000 or something like that. But when you throw in the Chinese numbers, it goes from 250,000 to like 800,000. Now, is that something that is actually happening, or is it just sort of people taking numbers and conflating them?
So I've written about this before for TEO. I'm happy to send you a link to the article that you can include in some show notes.
Sure.
But really, the key thing here with Chinese numbers is that we don't know.
Okay.
There's no verification strategy other than through the publishers. There's we only have Twitch really where people have coalesced and watched esports stuff. Yes, there's some stuff on Facebook. Yes, there's some events that are only on YouTube, but Twitch is primarily the esports viewing platform. In China, there's like 5 or 6 different platforms. Don't know how accurate the numbers that show up are through their APIs and just, being able to query that data. We've got very little understanding of how accurate their servers are. You're going to put a lot more emphasis on making sure that people are connected to content rather than recording how many people are actually connected to that content.
Okay.
So that will throw the numbers off.
Mm-hmm.
Frankly, the numbers that get posted around, especially for Chinese viewership immediately after the events, not to throw anyone under the bus or anything, but I wouldn't trust them as far as I could throw them.
Okay.
If you cut it down by 5 or 6 times, that might be more accurate.
Okay.
In particular, because for just as an example, the League of Legends world viewership numbers for last year came out, and I mean they were astonishingly high. I mean,
yes, they were.
To the point where I was like, "Are you serious? You're saying that 9% of all of China watched League of Legends live?"
Yes, exactly.
That was what people were saying for the peak concurrence, and I mean, you got to think about it
right
in the sense of, is this actually a realistic number to think about?
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So we have the Overwatch numbers. They're good, and I one thing. So one thing I want to say about Season 2 versus Season 1. Season 1 has so much hype behind it and so much push that everybody just kind of wanted to tune in just to see what all the hype was about. So there's no way you're going to have anything close to Season 1 and Season 2. It's just it's just not going to happen because the way Overwatch was branded from the start, before anybody saw anything, was that it's the next big thing, and so people tune in just to figure out, is this esports thing, is it actually worth watching? And people who aren't as versed in the scene will tune in and go, what the heck is this game? I'm not going to waste my time figuring this out because I don't even know what the heck it is. And so those people turn it off. Now you're back in season 2, and having 6.6 million hours viewed is still a strong number, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's difficult to compare to season 1, as you alluded to, just because there are so many people that were just, hey, I've been seeing this thing being promoted. I was curious about the World Cup. One of the things that also happened right before the start of season 1 was Blizzard implemented some of their changes, like, making all of the effects as one particular color for the viewership. There was also a lot of hype just around, hey, there's this very professional league happening. Right. I'm just curious. And even you see this on a smaller scale just throughout the week. People, like, the best day, like single day for Overwatch League was on Thursday. Better on Sunday for sure. Yeah. But just in terms of the unique viewers, one of the things that I should clarify here is that sometimes people will throw out like a viewers number on Twitch, and they're typically getting that by looking at the number of page views. That's not really an accurate measurement of the total number of unique people tuning in because if you refresh the stream, you count as a new view. If you leave the stream and come back, you count as a new view. So at FanAI, we actually are able to look at what specific individuals are watching. Right. And so we can actually get an accurate number for unique viewers within a certain range.
Right, and of course, no one would ever develop a bot that would refresh a screen like every 30 seconds. I mean, that wouldn't happen, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost as if like there aren't botnets being programmed that'll watch a bunch of things where you could buy views.
What?
Yeah. What a mind-blowing concept.
Okay, fair enough. Now, let's take those numbers that we had with Overwatch, 6.6 million hours viewed, and compare that to an event that ran at the same time overseas. Now, so sort of talk about those numbers with Katowice, and also understanding that event is not just a single game, right?
Yes, I actually pulled the numbers just for CSGO before we started talking, but IEM Katowice is hosting an event for StarCraft and for Fortnite, although my understanding is that a lot of the big Fortnite personalities that got invited to Katowice to compete are actually skipping the event just because they're so concerned with their stream not losing subs while they're away. Right. So, like, I think I saw Tfue from FaZe and his partner are choosing to not go to Katowice because of that. Okay. But, just to give you some perspective, hours watched, there's been some talk in the last week or so about how that might not be the metric, and Katowice is sort of a good example of that. Compared to Overwatch, it earned more hours watched. It's closer to 8.2 million hours. But, and this may be just how ESL has chosen to run the content, if you look at the actual numbers, they're running content, they're doing 48-hour long streams. So they're constantly running stuff for, the entire time, which makes it really difficult to say, well, I mean, technically they're streaming, so we should count that. But should we only count when there are matches happening, or should we count the reruns? There's a lot of these sort of more touchy-feely questions, as I like to call them. Got it. Where data is more of an art rather than a science. Wow, that's a good. That whole thought process is really, really interesting. Data as an art in esports versus a science, quote unquote. Because I was just thinking that. We don't have a consistent way to measure stream data right now, whereas with a television, pretty much everybody agrees that there is one sort of a governing body of the rating system. So I think that's a definite gap in the market overall, and I don't think that'll actually change very soon. What do you think? Yeah, I'm with you on that one. Okay. Not to say that TV ratings are bad necessarily, right? But there's only one company making them, and that helps to, standardize what the metric is.
Right.
So, the other thing to consider there is that it's all based on survey data. So, they have a certain number of devices, in people's homes that, checks in on what they're watching, and then they're extrapolating from that data. It's one of the reasons why, in particular, esports is such an exciting, new venue for content. It's, you can, if you're watching online, you can actually see in real time how many people are tuning in. And, specifically with the access that we have at FanAI, we can see what specific users are watching. So we can track, are people coming back week after week? Is it the same people tuning in or is it different people?
Right.
And questions like that, don't even bother trying to ask them in TV.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that whole technology doesn't even exist. Okay, so when you're talking about CS:GO, so Overwatch has for the hours watched were about 6.6 a million, but then you go over to CS:GO and you got, it's more than that, but then how is it measured and things like that. So in terms of the comparison between the two, I mean, is it even possible to do that, or are we comparing apples to bananas here?
We're kind of doing the apples to bananas comparison to a certain extent. I would say that one of the things that is important to look at, so, I mean, you've got a bunch of different metrics that you'll see people reporting on in viewership data. Typically the ones that you'll see are how many hours did people watch? What was the average concurrent viewers? What were the peak concurrent viewers or max concurrent viewers? They're interchangeable.
Right.
And how many hours somebody streamed for. The thing that you have to keep in mind is that average concurrence, they're all related. So average concurrence is really just a measure of, at any given point, on average, how many people were watching.
Okay.
And the way that people arrive at that metric, typically, certain companies might have a slightly different way of calculating this, but generally speaking, it's somewhere around dividing the number of hours watched per hour of content aired.
Okay. Got it.
Roughly. It depends on the exact, service that you'll use, just because, things like how often you sample Twitch will change what that number comes out to be. If you have more data, like some companies will only sample Twitch streams every 10 minutes.
Okay.
At FanAI, we sample the streams every 3 minutes, which gives us roughly 3 times the resolution of a lot of the free services that are out there.
Got it.
And because of that, we can typically get a more accurate number.
Okay.
All those services are generally correct. I'm thinking Twitch Tracker, I'm thinking, Twinge and Sully Gnome, all great services, really interesting to look at, especially if you're an amateur looking at this. But because of those sampling differences, none of these numbers are going to be exactly the same depending on where you go.
Okay.
And because of that, I mean, the reason why I like viewer hours is because it does take into account time. I feel like, especially when you're talking about streamers, it's very valuable to reward people for streaming more.
Okay.
If you're just looking at average concurrence, then you essentially are normalizing for time streamed, and in that case, I mean, that's why all of the E3 presentations that are exactly an hour long and a bunch of people tune into them specifically just for that, and then they'll, stay away. There's some value in being able to keep people entertained for a longer period of time.
Got it.
But when it comes to esports, it's a little complicated because, do you count the countdown numbers? Do you count, the downtime in between matches? Do you count, other things like that? I mean, you can sort of analogize them to commercial breaks. Clearly, not everyone turns, their stream of an NBA title or an NBA match off, when the commercials come on, and that factors into it. But there aren't clean start and end times like there are in TV.
Got it.
Because of that, it's a little bit difficult to really say what should be counted, what shouldn't be counted, and what really matters. And we're also trying to use the same metrics for two very different things.
Got it.
We're using the same measurement for esports and for streamers, which
Oh, yeah.
I'm not sure that's necessarily the best thing to do. I always like viewer hours much more for individual streamers and average concurrence typically for esports events. Just because esports events tend to have that more structured feeling to them. Like, you want to know how many people watched the finals of this particular tournament.
Right.
That's where average concurrence is more valuable.
Okay, so speaking of data and being able to access more, how do you so in the position you have, how do you correlate the viewership numbers combined with some of the shares, reactions, conversations on social media? Because it seems like trying to integrate what happens on Twitter and correlate it to what's going on during the event would be a pretty valuable thing. But you have to consider not everybody uses the same hashtags, and not everybody. It's hard to track a conversation when they're not using specific words. So is that like so when you're trying to integrate Twitter and Facebook and the various platforms into your data set, all these APIs and everything, it just seems to be it's almost too complicated. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, so let's start with one thing.
Okay.
Facebook is a black box for data. Facebook has come under fire in the last several years for a lot of their data sharing practices, with good reason, a lot of them. But one of the things that people haven't quite realized that has been sort of beneficial to Facebook in some ways is that they've been able to now take their data where it was public before and say, yeah, we're not going to give you access to that anymore. Thanks, but no thanks. And what that's done is made it a lot harder to get access to Facebook data, and it's made given Facebook a lot more control over who their partners are around that kind of data. It's one of those things where in esports, most of the numbers that you see out there don't include Facebook for that particular reason. It's just nigh impossible to let alone streaming numbers, compared to what people are posting about or talking about. I mean, that's a whole separate conversation.
Got it.
Let's drill down a little bit more into Twitter.
Okay.
Twitter is a really interesting social network, just from a data perspective, because it's very much about influence and who is pushing a message. I mean, that's really where the term influencer comes from, is from data.
Okay.
When you look at, there's a whole discipline around network analysis. So if you look at it, the idea is generally you have specific people, or, sometimes they call them nodes, and you see how many connections, or, like in this case, it's how many people follow or how many people retweet a particular person's tweet. I'm sorry about my cell phone just went off.
That's okay. That's all right.
I'm going to put that on silent anyways. So because of that, you can see, people always talk about, if you look at people and see how many people they follow versus how many followers they have, that's a very easy proxy for talking about influence. It's not the only way to measure it.
Right.
And very clearly, there are certain people who may not have as many followers, but certainly have a lot of influence around the conversation.
Okay.
And measuring that is something that we're looking into at FanAI. We currently look at that, but it's not publicly available.
Got it.
But around that, there's a lot of really interesting insights. So if you look at, say, not only what people are talking about, what else they're interested in, that is something that's really valuable to a lot of teams.
Got it.
Specifically around measuring content around events, it's very challenging.
Right.
We can aggregate tons of different hashtags. We can figure out all the different misspellings and all the different, like, do we attach the date? Do we not attach the date? Etc.
Got it.
But sometimes the most important thing to take a look at is really what are the biggest tweets, and how many people pushed those, and that's really quote unquote what the conversation is around. I mean, you see people quote tweeting or memeing about this one particular thing. How many memes of that format are going out there?
Right.
The important thing also to note is also how many people are actually talking about it. Sometimes, if you look at a team, they'll say, oh, we have X number of followers on Twitter between us and all these players.
Right.
What they don't really take into account is, what if I follow both the team and the player? Am I being counted twice? That's really where the core value of FanAI is we've been able to say, all right, let's deduplicate all those people and give you your real number. So for events, I mean, that certainly helps give people a perspective on the number of unique people they're really potentially talking to when you aggregate all the teams participating, all the players participating, the main event handle, etc.
Got it. And then, and this is a really interesting conversation, because just because you have 25,000 followers doesn't necessarily mean a lot. What means more is each time you do something, tweet something, react to something, how many people of your 25,000 actually respond or react. And so I mean, I see people that say they have 25,000 followers, 20,000, 30,000, but their rate of interaction is around 5%. So
5% is actually really good for a tweet.
Okay, well, right. But it just seems to me that we're throwing around the wrong metrics here. That having a massive following on Twitter is great and all, but what you're really shooting for is the interactions, right?
Absolutely. I mean, like we maybe alluded to earlier, there's definitely nobody that pays for a bot farm to follow them on Twitter or anything,
that
right?
Never happens. I mean,
there's also definitely not people who just follow bazillion people and follow and then hope that they follow them back or unfollow them if they don't follow them back.
Well, yeah, there's not an actual service and a bot setup where you follow people, and if they don't follow you back within a certain time, then they unfollow you, right? That never happens either, right? Yeah.
I mean, there's also another piece of this where what if you have an inactive account?
Right.
Does that person really count as a follower if they haven't posted anything in 2 years or liked anything in 2 years?
Got it. Okay.
So there's a lot of sort of nuance that you can layer onto this.
Okay, perfect. So this is all awesome data. This is great conversation. There's a lot to this. So now going forward, what are some growing indicators, some emerging indicators that you see that brands and businesses can use to see how they're doing online? So obviously when it comes to Twitch, it has to do with hours viewed and concurrence, but I'm sure that you guys have access to deeper data. So what are some things that you see?
So I think that the biggest newer innovation that people aren't, certain people are aware of it, most aren't, but ad tech is really going to play a large role in esports in the next, for the foreseeable future, I guess. Ad tech, I'm specifically referring to link shorteners and cookie tracking and all this stuff that that people who are worried that, the government is spying on them. That's maybe the case. I clearly have no idea what the specifics are.
Right.
But like anytime somebody uses, say, Bitly, or, has like a custom domain name that's a link shortener. Okay. One of the things that I don't know that people realize is that typically those links give you cookies. It's essentially gives you access to understanding like what publicly available web pages are you looking at, for how long, lots of stuff like that. They can't see whether you buy things. It's all anonymized, so it's not saying you, that person right there, and using that specific computer with that specific account. So right. Nobody's tracking you as an individual. People are using it for aggregate level trends. Okay. But because of that sort of data, people can see, what sorts of other interests people have. This is really influential for sponsorships. So, if I see that all of my fans are looking at, say, like this one particular musical artist, or they're all looking at this one clothing brand, or they're really interested in clothing in general, that might be an indicator for me to go and say, if my fans are really interested in this kind of clothing, I should really spend some time trying to sell a sponsorship for that. It's one of the services that we provide at FanAI, and while it's not super sophisticated yet beyond that level, there's definitely more that can happen with it. And I think people are very interested to see what might be possible in the future. At the end of the day, literally everything you do online, I hate to break it to you, that's how Google makes all their money. If you're not paying for something, you are the product.
Exactly. And I think it's also important to note, and this is the basis of data analysis. The one individual data point is totally useless. What you want to see is the data in groups, and then you want to see and you want to accurately define that group, whether it's age or gender or their income level, or certain platforms that they're on, whatever that is. You want to be as specific as possible. Then you want to track it over time. What are the trends? Where does it go? Who do these people interact with? That's what matters. One individual person, what they do is totally worthless in the sea of data, because it's all about how one data point is I'm trying to say here, how one piece of data is connected to something else, right?
Yeah, you got to think about the analogy I always like to use is how think about how newspapers used to be printed with all their pictures. It's one drop of ink in a larger sea that paints a larger picture. Individual pieces of individual data points are important and very helpful. Right. But even if you only have 5 data points is useless compared to 20 data points. Right. That's why polling aggregates for presidential races, those are far more important than any given poll. Right. It's that's one of the things we refer to it in data science as the law of large numbers. As more data is gathered over time, it gets closer to what the reality should be. Because think about flipping a coin. Technically you have a 50-50 chance every single time. But you might just as an individual, get heads 8 times in a row. Right. Statistically, not impossible, but very improbable. And the more times you flip a coin, the more likely your average is going to hit 50%.
Right, exactly. I don't think that people really understand what the sample size is. You can find data and make it say almost anything that you want, but when you take the larger perspective, then you really understand understand the trends and everything. So, Jordan, thank you very much for making time for me. This is a conversation that I hope to have again very soon, because there's a lot to talk about when it comes to data, and you're an awesome person to have on. I appreciate your time. So as we shut this down, is there anything that you would like to promote for yourself?
Ooh, that's a great question. My Twitter is @jfragen, JFRAGEN, with an underscore at the end. You can find me on Twitter. I love to rant about different stuff going on in Smash and the FGC in general, and love talking about esports stuff. So give me a follow over there if you want to hear more about whatever I'm doing.
Awesome. Jordan, thanks again for making time for me. I hope we get to see each other again soon at an event. So if we see a Starbucks, I will, if you have an extra 20 or 30 minutes, we'll sit down and I'll buy you something that you like and we'll talk. Everybody, thanks for tuning in to the Game Haus. We always appreciate you stopping by. If you like the video, you can. If you like the video, go ahead and let us know in the comments, and hopefully here soon I'll have some more for you. Thank you very much.